amended. It was also noted during the course of the audit that formal written policies and procedures, including written guidelines, are not in place which govern the auction of town surplus or obsolete property, such as what are the criteria, justification used to determine which items are eligible for auction. Should prospective auctioned items first be offered to other town departments if deemed to be useful, or is trade-in more cost beneficial than auction? Are town employees, officials, and their relatives eligible to bid on auctioned items? It was recommended that official written policies and procedures be created and adopted, which govern the parameters surrounding the auction of surplus town property and obsolete property to ensure that they are in compliance with town code. Internal Audit prepared a draft policy and procedures for auction of town surplus obsolete property for management's review and for use as a guide.
Yeah, go ahead. You can go first.
Thank you, Connie. Just to understand the schedule, is this mostly vehicles? I mean, I see October 2022, we had one item sold for $27. Would that be a car? Or
I could look to see what exactly that particular item was, but it's a wide variety of.
okay, so it's not always vehicles.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's mowers, loaders, dump trucks, pickup trucks, passenger vehicles. It could be a small tool, perhaps, that they didn't need anymore and was considered obsolete or not of use to them.
And is there a minimum in this process? Does it go out for auction with a minimum price on it? Or
No, there's no price. There's just pictures, description of the item, and people bid as they see.
okay, so somebody
As they see fit.
could conceivably get lucky and get a functioning car for $27 if no one else was around to bid on it. Okay.
That's true.
Okay, the failure to comply with the town code, which was written in 1983, you said?
Yes.
Is, and I'm just going to ask your opinion, or maybe your perspective, I guess, and maybe what you heard from during the audit. Was the failure to comply, first of all, did people know about the town code? Secondly, does the town code, which is now, whatever that is, 40 years old, make sense? And the reason I'm asking is you've written a draft policy to enable people to comply with that code, and you've also mentioned that the town attorney, and arguably maybe it's the RTM, should be looking at the town code to kind of dust it off and refresh it. But what was it that wasn't complied with? And from your perspective, is this, does it make sense or does it need to be revised?
Right. Well, we do have this town code that was adopted in 1983. However, the town code does state that items that are deemed obsolete are first to, by a department, are first to be presented to the Director of Purchasing, and he is supposed to ask other towns, boards, commissions if they have a need for it. And then if there is a need for it, the item gets transferred to that department.
And is that the part that didn't happen?
And that is currently the part that does not happen.
Okay.
I am fully on board with auctioning these items because some of them are probably not safe. They're probably not, there's better and more improved machinery and equipment that's more reliable and efficient.
We get a few bucks.
Yeah, and so this is probably the most cost-effective way of ridding the town of this obsolete machinery and equipment. However, we do have this code that does state that the items are first to be offered to other departments, but we're not doing that. So basically, I was just bringing it to the purchasing department's attention and management's attention, just to let them know that there is this code in effect, and this is what it states. However, if we deem it to be outdated, it should be reviewed and amended, and perhaps that should be done by the town attorney, and as you said, reviewed and approved by the RTM.
So, and it seems logical that somebody in purchasing, for example, would look at these before we give authority to auction them off. I don't know how operationally that works. It seems logical to me, though. So the policy or the draft policy that you have written, how does that work in terms of just saying, knowing that, because right now, or maybe just refresh my memory, I probably read it in the report, but if someone decides to auction off vehicles or equipment or whatever, how does the policy ensure, or the proposed policy ensure that that can't happen without purchasing, reviewing, and making sure they've done what they're supposed to do?
Right, purchasing does have the access to the GovDeals website, and they can review what actually has been posted on the website and for auction. And I liked the idea of having the segregation of duties, the purchasing, reviewing the items that are going to be auctioned off, because perhaps these items are still of use to the town. And then the secondary person would be the DPW garage supervisor, who, once the item is sold, he is responsible for housing the item in the DPW lot and checking off the box at the GovDeals website stating it's been sold, paid for, picked up, and now the town can receive payment.
Okay, but just to make sure I understand, under the proposed policy, who would be authorized to actually list items on the GovDeal website?
That would be the director of purchasing.
So it would have, okay. Because when you said review, I wasn't sure. So it wouldn't be able to get on the GovDeal website without purchasing, or reviewing it, and now they would know that they're responsible before they do that to go through this process that's required, unless we conclude that this process should be amended for some reason. Okay.
That is correct. And then also to have criteria in place. For example, if a car is 10 plus years old, perhaps that's eligible for auction. If a car has over 100,000 miles, that would be eligible for auction. And what is the criteria right now that we use to determine if something is eligible for auction?
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So basically, one of your recommendations on this is to have the town attorney review the town code, and I guess some type of a meeting of the minds between purchasing and department heads about whether or not the town code section on this issue should be repealed or amended in some fashion.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. What's next?
Okay, the next one, it was a follow-up on audit report dated November 22nd, 2022. Town Transfer Station, surprise cash count and evaluation of internal controls.
We remember this one.
Yes. Audit findings and recommendations from the November 2022 audit resulted from the discovery where the Department of Public Works Administration eliminated the secondary checkpoint at the transfer station. The secondary checkpoint served as an important internal control because it required the guard to inspect customer receipts, thus ensuring that customers entering the transfer station had properly paid the cashier or weighed in at the scale house. The elimination of the secondary checkpoint was not reported to internal audit prior to its removal. I paid a return unannounced visit in August 2023 to the scale house and was able to freely walk into the cashier's station without identification. I had recommended in my previous audit of November 2022 that the door to the cashier's station remain locked during the business day. However, management feels that this is not feasible since the cashier must frequently leave the scale house, which also houses the cash register throughout the business day, to examine vehicles and their contents on the scale. I also noted that the checking of customer receipts was not being conducted, nor had a formal procedure for checking customer receipts been established. I further sent a secret shopper/customer to the transfer station on 5 separate occasions in August 2023, and he reported that no one had requested to check his receipt for payment. Management stated that they are checking receipts and have a camera system in place, which monitors the cashier station, and site visits are frequently conducted by the Assistant Director of Public Works. Visible signage stating scale house receipt required to enter facility has been posted per my audit recommendation. Management is preparing analyses of tonnage of waste entering the facility based upon revenue generated compared to total tonnage exiting the facility to capture any irregularities between the two per my audit recommendation. Daily reconciliations between the Enviro report to the truck cycle time report were not being conducted. The purpose of this reconciliation was to capture large haulers who dumped refuse without weighing in over the scale. Since the reconciliation was not being performed, then internal audit recommended that the use of a reweigh ticket be used instead, which guarantees that all haulers weigh in over the scale. Finally, a new cash register has been installed and is fully operational and replaces the former 15-year-old register per my audit recommendation.
Next question.
Go ahead.
So,
Questions?
to recap this, so first of all, when you issued the last audit, did management agree to implement all the recommendations? I know there were some that were disputed, but the ones that you followed up on, were those ones that were agreed to get implemented?
At our last meeting, I was told that they were going to be checking receipts. So when I followed up and I went to the transfer station, I personally went, I called myself undercover. I don't know if they recognized me or not. However, I did go, and no one checked my receipt. And I also sent another individual, and nobody checked that person's receipt.
But just to recap, the two things, it sounds like some of the audit recommendations, when you followed up, had been implemented.
Yes.
And some had not, and the two I picked up on were nobody's checking receipts, and then the reconciliation for the haulers was not being done.
Correct.
So they had committed to both of those things, but neither one of them were appropriately implemented. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And on the checking receipts, you mentioned something about someone monitoring this through a camera. Is that,
Yes.
Is that feasible? From your perspective? I mean, I don't know how close.
Yeah,
I mean, is somebody, to me, this would require somebody sitting at a camera, staring all day to make sure someone pays and that they do the thing. And seems like that's not possible.
Yeah, the only benefit of the camera system is if you know there's something felonious going on, then you can monitor for a period of time to see if you find something wrong.
Who would be doing the monitoring? Who's sitting by that camera?
Currently, the cameras are in the Assistant Director of Public Works office.
Okay,
And there's
so-
various cameras around the whole facility, and,
Okay.
he can, I'm sure.
We wouldn't, this is just my gut reaction. We wouldn't want the assistant director sitting around all day looking at that camera, is what I would guess, correct? I mean, he's got more important things to do.
I think on a random basis, he's,
Okay.
reviewing the camera footage.
So, but was that the response on why they're not checking receipts? Because that camera's in place?
Well, they had told me that they, on a random basis, if they see a customer, they question what type of garbage they're dumping, they'll check the receipt at that time. But there's no formal, every 10th person or, every a certain number of people per day, let's check their receipt, similar to something that you would see at, for example, BJ's or Costco or even Rings End Lumber. They have a person who does check your receipt, and the purpose of that is to make sure that you did pay at the cashier's station.
Okay, and then the second, I think there were only two that you said, so the checking of receipts and then this reconciliation. So again, was that, the reconciliation was something that they committed to do and it wasn't done at all, or it wasn't done consistently?
Yes, they had committed to do that reconciliation, and then when I went to check, it had not been done.
Was there a reason?
I believe it was time constraints that he was not able to get to performing those reconciliations.
Okay, and can you remind us again, so this is one of those departments where we collect cash, and I say cash loosely, we collect revenue is probably a better term, right? Cash, credit cards, et cetera. What is and some, I imagine the haulers, they check in and then we bill them or they pay by check. What's the total revenue? It was a few $1 million, as I recall, right?
Yes, let's see, for example, fiscal year '23, they had, for cash and check revenue was 350,000. Haulers on the debit system was 2.6 million, credit cards 199,000, totaling approximately 3.25 million.
Okay, so roughly 200 of credit cards, 350,000 of cash, is that?
Yes,
And 2.6 million billing to haulers.
yes,
So the 2.6 million is the issue that's connected to this reconciliation question.
yes,
Okay, and then obviously checking receipts applies to the other $450,000. Okay.
yes.
And was there, sorry, because I read these reports last Friday and I've forgotten already. Where was this left off with management in terms of the result of this audit?
Well, I believe currently they're just continuing with this process, but here's Jared. Why don't you fill me in?
So, good evening. A couple of things on the, with regard to the doors being unlocked or not. There's two doors to that facility. One remains locked. The one that was open that Connie went into typically is open because the person goes in and out of there. If the person leaves, like to go up to the top where the transfer station is and where the disposal happens, we're told that they lock that door. So it's not unattended. It's not like that door is left open. And so there, with regard to there were a couple of different issues that came up. What were your two questions regarding?
My questions were on the recommendations that were supposed to be implemented or not. One was no one checking receipts to make sure people had paid before they dumped their garbage, and two, the reconciliation that was done for the haulers. And the purpose of that, Connie, if I got that right, was to make sure that we're billing for the correct.
Well, that was to ensure
Tonnage.
that the haulers that go over the scale are indeed getting a way ticket
The way ticket, so we bill them for the correct amount, right?
which is applied to their debit system.
And so we were told after a meeting with them that they would start doing the reconciliation. And also with regard to checking receipts, that they would check them, not every single receipt, but that they would check a percentage. And I think the percentage that we talked about was about 10% of people that come through there.
Can I ask a question? Did you have that meeting with them after this updated report came out, or was that after the first report came out?
That was after the updated report.
Okay, so the updated report came out October 3rd, right? Okay, of this year. And then you had a meeting with them since that date, telling them that they need to start complying with the reconciliation recommendations made by Ms. Axel. Is that fair to say?
Right, and they had agreed to that, and they had agreed to do a sample check of the receipts.
Ms. Axel, do you have a point of view on sampling tickets? I mean, I just feel like if there's a part-time individual, you just check the tickets, like what do you just pick every 10th person or something? I'm trying to understand if, is it time consuming to do this? Is that the person's entire job? Or are they doing other things? Like why would we go toward a sample instead of just checking people's receipts?
Well, the person who was in the secondary guard check had been actually relocated to another checkpoint in the facility and was doing other functions. However, to me, I would imagine he could possibly check every receipt, but even if he did a sampling, but he would have to retain those receipts for me to come and make sure that he really did do that task. So when I went with myself and when I sent my undercover person, no one had checked those receipts at all. Nobody asked to see a receipt. I didn't even witness anyone else's receipt being checked.
Okay, I'm just gonna.
I can follow up on that because I think one of the issues has to do with the volume of traffic up there. And if you get to, busy time of day and you have one person up top who's checking receipts, I know that the transfer station director had been, they were definitely concerned about the quality of material and where the material was being dumped. And so to be sure that there wasn't, someone who was going there pretending that they had recyclable material when it wasn't, and dumping it into the recyclable material, because that ends up costing us more money. So there's really, there's two aspects to this. One is the financial controls, and the other one is the control of the and monitoring of the types of materials that are dumped, and being sure that they're following the rules of what should be dumped where. And so if you have one person up there, and it's a busy time of day, it does become difficult for them to check every single receipt.
Okay, yeah, I don't have an opinion because I haven't spent time there, but I guess part of what bothers me about this one is that we talked about this extensively, recommendations were made, they were agreed to, and then they just weren't implemented. And so now we've gone back and we have a couple of the same recommendations again and promising again, but is there any accountability for this? I mean, what, and not to bring up a sore point, but, we had a lengthy discussion about the credit card issue. We had recommendations made, they weren't implemented, and they just weren't implemented. So, what I find difficult about these is just there has to be a culture of accountability where people are held accountable for implementing recommendations that they commit to. And these, to me, seem reasonable. If someone wants to make a case that checking 10% of the receipts is adequate, then I think they should respond to that. But we've got $500,000 of revenue here. It seems like that's just on the individuals. That's not the haulers. I would agree. There's more than one issue, right? They want to make sure they're not bringing toxic material and putting it where they shouldn't. That's a separate issue. But on the financial controls, I don't understand. I'm not sure I understand why we can't do this. So I'd like to. I'm just going to reread the report. I read it quickly last Friday, but I do think it's troubling when we have these reports issued and the recommendations don't get implemented. I think that has to change.
There's a few different measures that are in place. including the cameras, including signage. And so, we're kind of looking at the totality of the situation up there. And so we'll continue to monitor it and make sure that they're following up on our recommendations. But the absence of them doing these things, I wouldn't say that there are no controls, that there are things in place that are deterrents and to prevent people from trying to, or prevent employees from doing bad things there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I just, in general, if we're going to be looking at the totality of things, if someone doesn't agree, the time to address that is in the response to the audit report. Once somebody agrees that they're going to implement something, they should do it. And if they don't, that's a problem. Because if they think it's not, and we've had situations, we had several on the DPW audit, we've had some on internal audit where, management's come back and made a credible assertion that there's not a cost benefit to doing it or whatever. Or they can't do it because there's a system limitation, so there's some compensating measure they're going to take. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. That wasn't the issue with the credit card thing, and that's why I'm raising it. If we've got audit reports, recommendations are made, management agrees, there should be an expectation that they're implemented.
And I encourage you to read John Catel's responses, because he did respond to each of the.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. John, do you have any more on this one, or do you want to go?
We should probably go on to the next. Do you have one more, right, Connie?
Yes.
Okay.
And the last one is the audit of cash check deposits, Recreation Department, H. Smith Richardson Golf Course, and Carl J. Dickman Golf Course. A review of cash and check collections and corresponding bank deposits was conducted for the 11-month period covering July 1, 22 through May 31, 2023 for the Recreation Department, Carl J. Dickman Golf Course, and H. Smith Richardson Golf Course. The review showed that $1,607,635.51 in revenue in the form of cash and checks was collected and deposited by the Recreation Department. A comparison of deposit transmittals to bank deposit amounts revealed an overall net cash underage of $909 for the 11-month period, which results in a 0.057% error rate. Internal audit deems this cash underage amount to be immaterial in dollar value in comparison to overall revenue collected and deposited by the department. However, it was noted on 5 occasions within this time frame that cash shortages over $30 occurred without documentation of a reasonable explanation. The total cash under for these 5 deposit transmittals was $1,029. 2 of these deposits represented cash shortages that were in excess of $150, and 2 deposit transmittals totaling $425 did not have bank deposit slips attached. Further audit investigation revealed that there was not an associated bank deposit for these 2 days, and each of them represented cash collections, no checks. These 2 deposits were not reported to internal audit as required by town deposit transmittal policies and procedures. The town deposit transmittal policy and procedures was redistributed to the department head. The requirements of the policy were further explained to the department head, including deposit transmittals should not be signed by the department head, designating his review and approval if there is not a validated bank deposit slip attached for the correct amount. A brief explanation should be documented on the transmittal describing the reason, if known, for any corresponding bank deposit discrepancy over $25. All cash over under amounts in excess of $150 must also be investigated and reported to an internal audit in accordance with town policy. Frequent cash over under occurrences between deposit transmittals and bank deposits may warrant further investigation by internal audit and may result in possible disciplinary action by town management.
Questions?
Of course, I have a question. So this is 1.6 million in revenue in the form of cash and checks. And Ms. Saxel, you've heard me before, I hate collecting cash anywhere, but so my first question is on the revenue. So how is that, and if you've said it in here, I apologize. How do we know the 1,000,007 is, or the 1,607,000 is all of the revenue? Is there a cash register? What is the mechanism to make sure that somebody doesn't, just take cash and put it in their pocket?
Yes, and the Recreation Department, there's applications to sign up for classes and programs. Based on these applications, the applicant pays the cashier. It gets entered into a rec track, it's called, system, and there's end-of-day reports, and it's reconciled, and bank deposits are made accordingly. At the H. Smith Richardson Golf Course, they do have a cash register system in place, and same at Carl J. Dickman. End-of-day reports, it's more computerized, end-of-day reports are printed, shows you the total cash collected, which are agreed to bank deposits and so on.
So we have a cash register system,
Yes.
and you're satisfied that we're not, can't initiate a transaction without getting it into the system somehow. So,
And the golf course is similar to, for example, the transfer station. They have people who are checkers, and they'll check your receipt before you go on to the golf course to make sure that you have paid the cashier.
right. But once, if you give, okay, so we collect cash, we give receipts. Some of the cash, not a lot of money, but some of the cash walked away, it sounds like. And, or it was recorded, but there's no bank deposit. And does someone do bank recs? I mean,
Yes, that was my function also. I did the rec.
So you found this through the
I
bank
found
rec?
that through the bank
Okay.
reconciliation process as well.
So you were reconciling as part of the bank reconciliation, you were reconciling the deposits to the revenue system?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. They didn't have the explanation for why this cash that was collected. Okay. Yeah, and I fully recognize it's not a lot of money, but it's a
Right.
problem with taking
It's a
cash.
small amount of money, however, if it happened once or twice, it may happen again. That's why I needed to, present
Agreed.
it to management so they were aware of it and know what the proper policies and procedures, what they are, and to abide by them, to explain them to them and tell them they must abide by these policies and procedures to help prevent this from happening again.
And you're confident that we can't, that it's not a risk, or at least it's not a substantial risk, that we're collecting cash without issuing receipts and without getting this into the system to be identified?
Well, every cash collection must have a receipt associated with it. However, there's always opportunities for a cashier to collect money, not enter.
Receipt is printed from the system, from the registry, right?
It's printed from the register, goes into a computerized system.
Okay. Okay. John?
Just on this, before, if you pay for your round of golf, you get a receipt and you have to show the
Yeah,
starter.
The starter, yes, that's
the
correct.
receipt. So that's a check and balance. of
Right,
all this.
yes.
Okay, all right. I don't have any more questions.
Just a quick one, and back on this subject of cash, I think at one point we talked about this, but did you do something in the past to figure out the universe of where we're taking cash around town?
I believe I could collect that information for you, but it's pretty much every department does collect some form of cash or checks
Okay, yeah, that would be, I think,
for town services.
I mean, I just think in terms of, thinking about your audit plan and just looking at risk. I mean, my guess is that this is a lot of small amounts in a lot of places. And so maybe, that would be informative. If it's not, it's hard to imagine that this is material, but it's also, just not a good practice. practice. And so I hope that, in addition to being susceptible to theft, cash just, it's more time consuming to deal with. We may have a credit card fee. We've got a separate process to reconcile, to physically go to the bank and bring cash. We've got cash sitting around until we do that. It's really hard to believe that that's a smart way to handle these transactions from an efficiency perspective, as well as a control perspective around town. So I would love to see that data and just understand what it amounts to in terms of overall dollars. So, thank you.
Yes, and I just want to let you know also that there's 5 draft audit reports currently in management review. So hopefully that'll be our next meeting.
Okay.
January.
Sounds great. Yeah, we'll meet in January or at some point. All right. Thank you, Connie.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
And Joe,
As always, appreciate all you do.
hey, Joe, can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So you're up next. And this is item number 2, to hear an update from external auditor Joe Setafani of PKF O'Connor Davies LLP. So whenever you're ready, Joe, we'd like to see your face and we can hear you.
So yeah, I forgot. I turned the video off so it wasn't distracting anybody. All right.
Go ahead, Joe. How are
All
you?
right. Good. How are you?
Good.
So the big picture as far as audit status is we're coming to the end of the process. We're in shape as far as all the bigger things that we needed. The GASB 96, the subscriptions, we have most of that. I just got some last minute things for you for the Board of Ed at the end of the day. But substantially, we've gone through it for the town side. We completed that process, I think, roughly last week. Federal and state single audit report and draft.
Hey, Joe, do me a favor and talk into your microphone a little bit better. Thanks.
So, and my plan is should get a draft later this week. My review, and between now and over the weekend, review that. And by the end of Monday, I'm hoping to have a draft to give to the town to review. So the main open items are basically going to be attorney letters. I think I asked for a response date of the 7th, so it's a couple days away. So we'll follow up with them on if we don't receive them. I did receive one, but there's 3 others that I do not have. But kind of the big picture. I don't have any specific questions, but we're in shape. Everything went fairly.
Joe, you're kind of cutting in and out. Sometimes your voice is loud and sometimes we can barely hear you. I don't know if that's your microphone or us.
So we heard you basically, I think what we heard is you're going to have a draft by next week and that you're still waiting on information based on 3 letters that you sent out to town officials. Is that what you said?
Town attorneys.
Town attorneys, okay.
So, but again, I did ask for a response date of the 7th, so they're not necessarily late. I just don't have that. So I would expect that we get them next week.
Okay.
The process.
Laura, do you have any questions?
Yes, question, Joe. So thank you for the update. I'm glad to hear that we're on track. Hopefully, I think it might be helpful to do what we did last year, even though we are on track. Last year, I think we wound up having the audit committee and the town kind of review the draft concurrently. I don't think that's a bad idea, just so that we have some more time. So I'll throw that out there. I guess one question I have a couple questions for you. First, we recognize that there are some calculations that go in the financials that you prepare for us. But aside from those adjustments, were there any other audit adjustments that were either recorded or unrecorded that came up as a result of your audit? Anything of significance? Whether due to, errors or anything like that?
No, not that I'm aware. I don't. Today, but yeah, I think there was any significant audit adjustments. I mean,
Okay, thank you.
some of them are the bigger adjustments are on the top statements, which the town gives us the data, and we might facilitate that. But
Yep, okay, thank you. And are you intending to issue what we used to call in the old days a management letter, or are you planning to make any internal control recommendations, or do you have comments on internal controls that we should be aware of as a result of your audit?
I'll go back and look. I don't remember anything specifically from the town side. That I think I will have a couple of recommendations for the Board of Ed on some of the education grants. I think there are this year, but initially they weren't addressed. Had to be done as far as calculating receivables and unearned revenue, just kind of doing the accounting the way it's supposed to be done. But I eventually got something that way.
Hey, Joe, you're cutting in and out. I'll just say what we did here is that you didn't anticipate any recommendations on the town side. There are a couple on the Board of Ed side that you have. Are you going to provide those in writing, even if informally, to us as well as them?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Once they're written, then send them to the Board of Ed. Make sure I got my facts or whatever comments are, and then yes, you will get something written.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, similar to what we said during internal audit, we just want to make sure that there's a process that those get implemented going forward. So thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Joe. And I don't have any questions. We'll connect probably early next year. And apologize with the draft, right? And we apologize about the technical difficulties at the start of the meeting, but thanks for being here, and have a good holiday. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yep, you too.
All right, the final item on our agenda, well, the second to final besides adjourning, is to hear, consider, and approve the minutes of June 6, 2023, September 11, 2023, September 19, 2023. Can I get a motion from you? I'll second it.
Motion, second.
Are there any changes you want to make, Lori?
I don't have any changes to the minutes. I just, as I read them, I was reminded that we had the fraud policy as a follow-up item, so I hope we can address that on a future agenda soon. But I have no comments on the minutes.
Yeah, good point. So make a note of that. All right. So all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
It's unanimous, people who are here. And then the next item on the agenda is a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.